And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we are talking about the Chicago Bulls shutting down trades for Coby White and if that is the right move. Next, we're going to be talking about Matas Buzelis going up the draft board in a redraft article. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Matas Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about the latest around Coby White. And so if you have not got a chance to see this, you can head over to Dallas Hoops and it is under this article. And so the key piece of information is what an NBA exec had to say. And so this is what was said. It says that I know multiple teams tried to trade for Coby this summer, the NBA exec said. There was some chatter that he was almost traded on draft night. The Bulls love him, though. He's not going anywhere. They have shot down trade inquiries for him. All right, and so a good piece of information here, as it says, an NBA exec says that the Chicago Bulls love him, and they have shot down multiple trades here. And so, that just makes me think, is this the right move for the Chicago Bulls? And so I think that, taking and not trading Coby White right now actually might be the right move for the Chicago Bulls. And I think that the first thing that comes to mind here is I think that Coby White really is going to raise his value even more this season. I'm betting on Coby White taking a step forward. I've said this before. Between him, Ayo Dosunmu, those are players that I just don't worry about as far as figuring it out. I think that they come into each season trying to figure out a way to get better. And that's exactly what we saw with Coby White with his numbers. And so not just looking at what he did down the stretch, but when you look at it from the totality of things, 20.4 points after the season before, he was at 19.1. Also, too, you see that his steals went up to 0.9 from 0.7. His free throw percentage went up to 90.2. And then also, too, when you look at his field goal percentage, it slightly went up to 45.3. And so for me, I think that you are looking at a player that is going to come into this next season. There is no Zach LaVine. There is no DeMar DeRozan at this point in time. And I think that if AK really wants to see if his plan is going to work, then he would be wise by going ahead and putting Coby White in the same role that he had last season and then running it back with Josh Giddey and seeing exactly what you have. Because that, I think, is one of the bigger questions here, really with the fan base, is just how for real was that run down the stretch and how for real is this backcourt? You really get some good, just kind of insight as to how real this thing is, and then you can go ahead and pivot accordingly, because I do think that even if Coby White is slightly off of what he did last season, I still think that there is going to be a trade that is going to be available during the season here. And I just think that he's going to ball out. And I think that the Bulls are going to be wise here, because if they do want to flirt with trading Coby White, I think that as his value goes up this season, which I do anticipate, that you're going to have more offers than what you probably had there at draft night. And so let's see how the Bulls really elect to play this, but I'm betting on Coby White. And I just think that it's interesting that you see this as it's an NBA exec, obviously, anonymous here, that is saying that the Bulls love Coby White and that there was some chatter around him on trade night, but it looks like that they have turned, trades down. And so you guys let me know in the comments here, do you think that Coby White should have been traded on draft night? Should he be traded immediately here this season? Because here's one more thing that I will say about this with this Bulls team. When you look at the schedule, it's a schedule that is going to be tough initially. And there is no Zach LaVine here. Yes, you still have Vooch, but you don't have players that need to necessarily, I would say, go out there and rehab their trade value. Like you're not having that type of situation on the team. I'm not sure if that was the case last season with Zach LaVine, but now, you can go out there, you can play the same type of basketball that you played last year, and you can just really see if it works. Because if it does not work, then what the front office is going to do or should do, I should say, is they need to pivot, and they need to pivot immediately. And so you have a chance to do so before you get locked into a deal where you see that it's not going to work. And so that is an issue in itself, because the front office has just really been slow to come off assets. And so I think that they're in really the driver's seat to move off an asset if you see that it is not going to work. And so anyway, you guys let me know about that. So next thing I want to talk about is Matas Buzelis here. And so with Matas Buzelis, this recently came out in an article. It was on The Athletic, guys. And so that is behind a paywall. And so if you guys want to read about this, you can go over to Bleacher Nation. This is Elias Schuster. And he just mentions, a key piece out of this article. And so once again, this is The Athletic. This is Sam Vicini who writes about this. And so he's talking about Matas Buzelis now moving up from 11 up to 6. And so this is what he had to say in his article in The Athletic. He says that I'm not quite as high as some on his upside, as I'm skeptical of his half-court shot creation ability because of his high hips and his inability to gain leverage with his lack of strength. But I buy Buzelis as likely a solid starting caliber wing because of his size, athleticism in the open court, and shooting ability. All right, guys. And so, he's moved him up to 6. And when we go back and we look at the actual draft board there, and so that would mean that Matas would jump Cody Williams, who went at number 10, Zach Edey, who went to the Grizzlies at 9, and then you have Rob Dillingham, who was 8. That would be Donovan Clegan at 7. And then you have Tejan Salome, who was number 6. And so that would put Matas there. And so, you know what? I'm with that. I do think that you could put Matas there at number 6. And I think that you could maybe make an argument that he could have maybe been at number 5. But I think because the Pistons played Ron Holland a lot more in his rookie season, I think that is fair. I think that Ron Holland definitely was in that 5 spot. But I think that Matas Buzelis definitely could have given Ron Holland a little bit of a run, especially with the situation that Chicago was in. Maybe Matas Buzelis would have kind of kicked it in a little bit earlier. We don't know. Either way, it seems like that it worked out. And so I think that, yes, this is fair to have him at 6. And I think that when we look back even another year from now, there's the possibility that maybe you could argue that Matas Buzelis could be maybe even higher into this one. And so I know, Stephon Castle had a really good year with the Spurs and suggests that he's going to have, another good year this upcoming year. But Reed Shepherd was taken at 3. And so far, Reed Shepherd has not done very much for the Rockets. I'm not saying that he's not going to, but I do think that there's a chance that Matas Buzelis takes a serious step here. And so you would have to consider that Matas Buzelis would jump there. And with Alex Sarr, I think that Alex Sarr really, he got the benefit of just the Wizards were not very good. And so he just got a lot of playing time out there. But when you look at the games and things like that, I thought that it was just a lot of just numbers out there, maybe empty calories, so to speak. But I definitely think, with Matas Buzelis coming into this season with more responsibility, I think he's gotten stronger, and I think he's going to get even better on the defensive end, which is one of the things that was really a highlight for him was the block shots. And so I think you're going to see more of that, especially with the strength that he's gained. I think that a lot of people around the league are going to see that he's a lot better individually defensively because of that, because with that strength, he's not going to be pushed around as much as far as players getting to their spots and things like that. And going back to the point that was made there in The Athletic, I think that with that strength, you're going to see that he is going to become a lot more crafty with his finishes and things like that. Absolutely. And so that's where I'm going with this one with Matas Buzelis. I think he can definitely climb higher after this year, and I'm okay with him being at 6 right now. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking about that with Matas Buzelis. Do you feel like he should be a little bit higher at this point in time in the redraft? And do you think that he could get even higher after this season here as far as going up the board in a redraft? And so next thing, I just wanted to kind of close with this. And so just thinking about this, going back to this Coby White situation, what is interesting with this is that when you look at a player like Tre Jones, and I said this on yesterday's video, that he really seems to be like the insurance policy, for Lonzo Ball, and or he was the insurance policy for Lonzo Ball if they went ahead and moved on from him, which I think you're going to see that. But also, too, I think another thing to think about with Tre Jones and a possible angle here is that maybe Tre Jones could be a guy that he would be pushed into an even bigger role if they do decide to move on from Coby White or Ayo Dosunmu. And so just thinking about that, here's a guy that is on a team-friendly contract. Just thinking about what he is as far as his skill set is concerned and being a guard or whatnot, but just wondering, like, is that also to a move that could be really on the table? But once again, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here. Once again, this is an NBA exec that said this, that the Bulls absolutely love Coby White, and that there was some chatter around him come trade night, but the Bulls obviously didn't do anything. And so you guys let me know, is it a good thing that the Bulls went ahead and they are keeping Coby White as of right now? Because I do think that he has a chance to raise his trade value even more if that is what you want to do. I'm not in the camp of trading him. I do think that he is going to prove that he certainly should be in Chicago, but this is going to be a little bit more of an interesting situation with him because there is no restricted free agency for him or Ayo Dosunmu. And so there are going to be a lot of teams that want Coby White, especially if he can continue off of what he did last season. Remember, he won the Eastern Conference Player of the Month. I believe that is something that DeMar DeRozan did. And so it just hasn't been done since then. And so it just lets you know just the type of path that maybe Coby White is on here. And so this is a guy that is set to take a major step. Perhaps this backcourt is going to turn some skeptics into believers. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you're thinking. And as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.